Hello everyone, my name is Fatin Amiraliana binti Muhammad and I am the head of internal audit. I will begin by presenting the executive summary of our cyber risk management audit. This audit was conducted for Actor Cyber using the ISO/IEC 27005 risk management framework together with ISO/IEC 27002 security controls. The objective of this assessment was to identify cybersecurity risks affecting the organization's critical hardware assets, evaluate their potential impact, and recommend appropriate security controls. Throughout our assessment, we identified a total of 10 cybersecurity risk scenarios involving assets such as firewall, DMZ servers, VPN remote access, employee endpoints, and network infrastructure. Our analysis found that the highest risks are associated with internet-facing services and remote access systems. These include unauthorized access, ransomware, DDoS attacks, phishing, and credential theft, all of which could significantly affect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the organization's information. Based on these findings, we proposed several mitigation measures, including firewall hardening, multi-factor authentication, patch management, network segmentation, and employee security awareness training to reduce the organization's cyber risk.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amira Aisha. Today, I will present about Section A and Section B of our internal audit report for at the cyber company. For these presentations, I will focus only on one asset type, which is the hardware asset. This is because the full report contains many types of assets, so focusing on hardware makes the presentation clearer and easier to understand. The main purpose of this section is to explain the context of assessment and identify cybersecurity risks that may affect hardware assets in cyber. For the scope of the assessment, we focus on hardware assets for the cyber network environment. The first area is the internal network zone. This includes hardware such as laptop, desktop, PC, switches, Wi-Fi router, IP, and network printer. These assets are used by employees for daily work activities. The second area is the perimeter edge zone. This includes the firewall and router. The two assets are important because they control communications between the internal network and the internet. The third area is the DMZ zone. This includes the web server, application server, and storage server. These servers are important because they support public-facing and semi-public-facing services. Lastly, the scope also includes remote access support, especially corporate laptops used by employees working from home through VPN access. Hardware assets are important because they support the daily operations of IT cyber. Without hardware such as firewall, router, switches, laptop, and servers, the company cannot operate its network, provide online services, or allow employees to access company resources. Hardware assets can help become entry point for cyber attacks. If a firewall is misconfigured, attackers may bypass the security perimeter. If employee laptop is compromised, attackers may use it to enter the internal network. Therefore, protecting the hardware asset is important to maintain the confidentiality, integrity, and availability in the organization. The business objectives of this assessment are based on the CIA triad, which stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality means protecting sensitive information from unauthorized access. For hardware access, this includes protecting data stored in the storage server, logging credentials used on laptop, and traffic controlled by the firewall. Integrity means ensuring that information and systems are accurate and not modified without permission. Availability means ensuring that system and server remain accessible when needed. Hardware such as web server, router, firewall, and switch must remain available so that employees and customers can access services without disruption. The risk critical are used to measure the seriousness of each risk. In this assessment, the risk score is calculated using the formula likelihood multiplied by impact. Likelihood measures how likely the risk is to happen. The scale is from 1 to 5, where 1 means rare and 5 means very likely. Impact measures how serious the effect will be if the risk happens. The scale is also from 1 to 5, where 1 means negligible and 5 means critical. After calculating the score, the risk is categorized in different levels. A score of 1 is categorized as very low. A score from 2 to 4 is categorized as low. The score of 5 to 9 is medium. 10 to 15 is high. And lastly, 16 to 25 is critical. This helped the audit team to decide which hardware risk should be treated first. There are several assumptions used in this assessment. First, the Atta Cyber operates as a multinational organization, so its hardware must support user systems and services across different locations. Second, the employees use laptop from work from home arrangement. This laptop connects the company resources through VPN, which may introduce risks such as stolen credential or weak authentication. Third, the DMZ contains servers such as web server, application server, and storage server. These servers may be exposed to external attacks because they support online services. Fourth, endpoint devices such as laptop and desktop are actively used by employees. This may be exposed to phishing emails, malware, malicious website, or unsafe network. Lastly, existing controls such as firewall, router, VPN, authentications, and network segmentations are already implemented, but they may still have weaknesses such as misconfigurations or weak monitoring. For asset identification, we selected 10 hardware assets from audit report. The first is the firewall, which filters incoming and outgoing network traffic. The second is the router, which connects the internet network. The third asset is the DMZ web server, which hosts public web services. Fourth is the DMZ applications, which runs businesses application. Fifth is the DMZ storage server. Other hardware assets includes the service, the switches, Wi-Fi router, corporate work from home laptop, IP phone system, and network printer. These assets were selected because they support important network operations and may be exposed to cybersecurity threats. Threat. This slide shows the main threats that may affect the hardware assets. Unauthorized access may affect firewall, router, and server if attacker manage to access system with operations. DDoS attack may affect the DMZ web server by flooding it with traffic until the service becomes unavailable. Web application attack may affect the DMZ application server if the attacker exploits weaknesses in the applications. Ransomware may affect the storage server or employee laptop by encrypting information. Man-in-the-middle attack may affect the Wi-Fi router by intercepting wireless communications. Other threats include credential theft, phishing, network scanning, information leakage, and VoIP misuse. These threats are important because they can affect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the hardware environment. For these presentations, we selected one hardware-related risk scenario for each risk level. The critical risk is RS01, which involves the firewall. If the firewall has misconfigured rules, attacker may bypass the security parameter and access internal or DMZ resources. This is critical because the firewall protects the entire network boundary. The high risk is RS03, which involves the DMZ application server. If the application is unpacked or insecurely coded, attacker may exploit it and compromise the server or manipulate the application data. The medium risk is RS05, which involves the Wi-Fi router. If the Wi-Fi encryption is weak, a attacker may intercept communication and steal login credential or sensitive information. The low risk is RS09, which involves the network printer. The printer access control is weak. Sensitive printed document may be exposed to unauthorized user. Very low risk is RS01, which involves the IP phone system. Weak call filtering may cause spoof or nuisance call, but the impact is mainly minor communication disruption. The risk scenario is created using the formula asset plus threat plus vulnerability. This means we identify the hardware asset, then identify the threats that may target it, and finally identify the vulnerability that allows the threat to happen. For example, the asset is firewall, the threat is unauthorized access, and the vulnerability is misconfigured firewall rules. The risk scenario is that attackers may exploit the misconfiguration firewall's rules by bypass the security perimeter and access the internal or DMZ resource. This method helps to explain how a cybersecurity incident could happen in a clear and structured way. So the five scenarios that we selected earlier were justified because they represent different hardware assets and different risk level. For RS01 was selected as the critical risk because firewall is the most important security devices. If it fails or is misconfigured, attackers may access important network areas. For RS03 was selected as the high risk because the application server may be exposed to web-based attack, especially if the application is not patched or securely developed. RS05 was selected as the medium risk because Wi-Fi security may expose communication, but the impact is lower than a firewall or server compromise. RS09 was selected as low because they printed printer-related information leakage may expose document, but it does not usually disrupt the whole network. Lastly, RS10 was selected as very low risk because VoIP nuisance call may interrupt communication, but they do not directly compromise critical system. So this context of assessment includes the scope, business objective, risk criteria, and assumptions. For this presentation, the scope was narrowed to hardware asset only. This hardware asset include firewall, router, switches, laptop, Wi-Fi, printer. So the focus on risk identification, we identify that hardware asset, related threats, related vulnerability, and selected risk scenario. To keep the presentation focused on hardware risk scenario was selected for each risk level, which is critical, high, medium, low, and very low. Overall, this section helped to show us how hardware asset in either cyber may be exposed to cybersecurity risks and why proper risk management is needed to protect confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Thank you.
Next, I will explain the chapter 4, which is risk analysis and risk register. After identifying all potential threats and vulnerabilities, the next step is to analyze each risk to determine how serious it is. In this stage, we evaluate every identified risk by considering two important factors: the likelihood of the threat occurring and the impact it will have on the organization if it happened. We follow the ISO/IEC 27005 methodology, where the overall risk score is calculated using the formula risk score equals to likelihood multiplied by impact. The results are then documented in the risk register and later used during the risk evaluation and treatment process. To ensure consistency throughout the assessment, we use a standardized 5-level rating scale for both likelihood and impact. For likelihood, a score of 1 represents a rare event, while a score of 5 represents a very likely event. Similarly, Impact is measured from 1, which indicates negligible business impact, to 5, which represents a critical impact that could severely disrupt organizational operations. By combining these two values, we obtain the overall risk score for each identified risk scenario. This approach allows us to objectively compare different cybersecurity risks and determine which ones require immediate attention. This slide presents a summary of our risk register, which records the identified cybersecurity risks, the affected assets, the associated threats, the calculated risk score, and the corresponding risk level. The purpose of the risk register is to prioritize risks so that the organization can focus on addressing the most critical issues first. Looking at the table, RS01, which involves unauthorized access to the firewall, received the highest risk score of 20, placing it in the critical category. This indicates that the firewall is a critical asset, and if it is compromised, it could allow attackers to gain unauthorized access to the organization's internal network. RS03, involving web application attacks on the DMZ application server, has a score of 15, which is classified as high risk. This shows that internet-facing servers are also significant targets for cyber attacks. RS05, which is a man-in-the-middle attack on the Wi-Fi router, received a score of 9, making it a medium risk. While it may not be as severe as the previous risk, it can still compromise network communication if left unaddressed. Finally, RS09 and RS10, involving information leakage from printers and VoIP misuse on IP phones, were assessed as low and very low risk. These assets have lower business impact and are less likely to be exploited compared to critical infrastructure. Overall, the risk register shows that the organization's highest priorities should be protecting the firewall, securing internet-facing servers, and strengthening network access controls before addressing lower priority risks. From our analysis, several important findings can be observed. First, the organization's highest cybersecurity risks are concentrated around internet-facing systems, remote access infrastructure, and critical data storage. Firewall misconfiguration, DDoS attacks, ransomware, and compromised VPN credentials receive the highest risk scores because they have both a high likelihood of occurring and severe business consequences. High-risk scenarios also include phishing attacks against employees and lateral movement within the internal network, which could allow attackers to compromise multiple systems. On the other hand, risk and lower probability compared to the organization's critical infrastructure. Overall, the risk analysis shows that strengthening network security, improving access control, and increasing employee awareness should be the organization's highest priorities before addressing the risk effects. That's my presentation on the executive summary and chapter 4 risk analysis and risk register. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Faria Afika binti Cik Harun. So my role in Aether Cyber Company is as Junior Internal Audit Manager, and I will present to you risk evaluation and risk treatment. Now I will present chapter risk evaluation. Risk evaluation is an important stage in the cyber risk management process because it helps to determine whether the identified risks are acceptable or if they require further treatment. At this stage, the audit team prioritizes risks based on their severity and business impact. For Aether Cyber, which is a multinational cybersecurity and digital technology company, protecting customer data and maintaining business continuity are top priorities. Therefore, risks involving VPN access, DMZ servers, firewall configuration, and employee endpoint devices must be carefully evaluated. This process follows the ISO IEC 27005 risk management framework, which support management in making informed decisions about which risks should be addressed first and how organizational resources should be allocated. So next is risk evaluation criteria. This evaluation is based on the overall risk score, which is calculated using the likelihood of the threat occurring and the impact it would have on the organization. Besides the score, we also consider the affected asset, the business impact, and the Aether cyber risk acceptance threshold. As shown in the table, risks are classified into 5 categories. Very low risk have a score of 1 and generally accepted. Low risk with score between 1 and 4 are accepted but monitored periodically. Medium risk, scoring between 5 and 9, require a review of existing security control and improvements where necessary. High risk, with score between 10 and 15, require treatment because they exceed the organization's acceptable level of risk. Finally, critical risk, which score between 16 to 25, require immediate management action because they pose a significant threat to confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the organization information asset. So, to determine the severity of each risk, we use a risk matrix. The matrix combines two important factors, which is the likelihood that a threat will occur and the impact if the threat is successfully exploited. So next, we have risk matrix zone. So the overall risk score is calculated by multiplying the likelihood value and the impact value. The matrix is divided into three color zones. Green represents acceptable risk that require only routine monitoring. Yellow represents tolerable risk where additional security control should be considered. Red represent unacceptable or extreme risk. These risks require immediate attention because they have the potential to cause significant operational disruption or financial loss. Using this matrix allows the organization to consistently prioritize cybersecurity risks and focus on the areas that present the greatest threat. After calculating the risk score, each identified risk was evaluated to determine whether it was acceptable, tolerable, or unacceptable. For example, in this, the DMZ application server received a likelihood score of 4 and an impact score of 5, giving a total risk score of 20. This places it in a critical category because it makes it unacceptable without treatment. Recommended actions include patch management, secure coding review, vulnerability scanning, and deploying a web application firewall. Next, for IDRS-08, router and internet switches receive a high-risk rating because successful attacks could allow lateral movement across the internal network. Recommended control include VLAN segmentation, access control lists, and continuous monitoring. Meanwhile, IDRS-09 network printer was classified as medium risk. Although it does not require immediate action, security control should be implemented to reduce future risk and maintain secure network operation. So once all risks have been evaluated, we rank them according to their priority. The highest priority risk is the DMZ application server, which a critical risk score of 20. Since the server hosts important business applications and sensitive data, any successful attack could severely affect the business operation. Second highest priority is employee laptop and desktop PCs. These devices are common targets because for phishing attack, which can result in malware infection, credential theft, and unauthorized access to internet network. The third priority is the DMZ web server because it provides public-facing services. A distributed denial service or DDoS attack could make company service unavailable and negatively impact customer trust and business continuity. These findings clearly show that critical risk must be addressed first before the organization focuses on lower priority risk. After prioritizing the risk, the next step is to justify why these risks require immediate action. So the highest ranked risk is the DMZ application server with a risk score of 20, which is classified as critical. This server hosts important business application and may contain sensitive organizational data. So if attackers successfully exploit vulnerability like SQL injection or remote code execution, they could gain unauthorized access, compromise confidential information, or disrupt essential business operation. Therefore, this risk must be mitigated immediately. Second highest risk is laptop and desktop PCs, which also fall under critical category with a risk score of 16. These endpoint devices are widely used by employees and are common targets for phishing attack. If an employee clicks on a malicious link or opens an infected attachment, attackers may steal credentials, install malware, or move laterally through internet network. So the treatment strategy is also to mitigate. The third highest risk is the DMZ web server, which is also another critical risk with a score of 16. Since this service provides public-facing services, it is highly exposed to distributed denial of service or DDoS attack. A successful DDoS attack could make online services unavailable, interrupt business operation, and reduce customer confidence in the organization. Overall, these findings indicate the most urgent risks involve the DMZ application server, employee endpoint devices, and the DMZ web server, because these risks directly affect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of a cyber's critical system. They are considered unacceptable without treatment and are carried forward into the risk treatment phase. After identifying highest risk priority risk, the next step is risk treatment. Risk treatment is the process of selecting and implementing appropriate measures to reduce cybersecurity risk to an acceptable level. ATA Cyber follows the recommendation of ISO IAC 2005, which provides several treatment strategies. The first strategy is to risk reduction, where additional security controls are implemented to lower the likelihood or impact of an attack. The second is risk avoidance, which involves eliminating activities or services that create unnecessary risk. The third strategy is risk transfer, where certain risks are transferred to third parties, such as through cybersecurity insurance or outsourced security services. Finally, risk acceptance is applied to low-level risks when the cost of implementing further control is greater than the potential impact. However, accepted risks are still monitored regularly. Our treatment plan focuses primarily on risk reduction, as most identified risks can be mitigated through stronger security control. For the DMZ application server, we recommend applying regular patch management, conducting secure coding reviews, performing vulnerability scanning, and deploying a web application firewall. This measure can reduce software vulnerability and help to prevent web-based attack. For employee laptops and desktop PCs, the proposed control include stronger email filtering, phishing awareness training, endpoint protection software, and blocking malicious website and attachment. This control reduces the likelihood of a successful phishing attack. For the DMZ web server, we recommend measures include DDoS protection, traffic filtering, rate limiting, continuous monitoring, and effective incident response process. This control improves service availability and reduces downtime during cyber attacks. After implementing this control, the residual risk for each asset is expected to decrease from critical to medium, which is also considered a much more management level. So in conclusion, the selected treatment strategies are based on the importance of the affected assets and ATOS Cyber's low tolerance for risks that could impact confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Risk reduction was selected as the primary strategy because most of the identified threats can be effectively controlled through stronger technical and administrative security measures. For example, patch management helps prevent server exploitation, while multi-factor authentication significantly reduces the risk of unauthorized access. For externally accessible systems such as the DMZ web server, additional protection like web application firewalls, DDoS mitigation, and continuous monitoring are essential because these systems are frequent targets of cyber attacks. Some risks may also involve risk transfer through cybersecurity insurance or third-party DDoS protection services, while lower-level risks can be accepted and continuously monitored. Overall, the proposed risk treatment plan provides a structured approach to reduce cybersecurity risk, protecting critical business assets, supporting regulatory compliance, and ensuring the continuity of ATOS Cyber's business operation. Thank you.
The main focus is ISO IEC 27002 control mapping. Control mapping is the process of linking each treated risk with the correct security control. This is important because after we identify and track risk, we need to prove that the process control are suitable and relevant. For example, if the risk is VPN credential theft, the treatment action may include multiple factor, authentication, strong password policy, session timeout, logging alerting, and VPN log review. These actions are the mapped to ISO IEC 27002 controls such as secure authentication, remote working, access right, logging, and monitoring. This mapping helps ATOS Cyber because it creates a clear connection between the risk, the treatment action, the control standard, and the team responsible for implementation. It also supports audit traceability. During an audit, the organization can explain why the specific control is selected and how it helps reduce a specific cybersecurity risk. In short, ISO IEC 27002 control mapping makes the risk treatment plan more structured, professional, and aligned with the international security practice. So the table shows how each important hardware asset is mapped to suitable ISO IEC 27002 controls. For example, the firewall is mapped to network security, logging, and monitoring because it protects the organization's network boundary. The DMZ server are mapped to control such as DDoS protection, vulnerability management, backup, and malware protection because they support public-facing and business-critical services. For endpoint like WFH laptops, awareness training, and endpoint protections are more important because phishing is the main risk. So in ISO IEC 27002, control are grouped into several domains. For ATOS Cyber, the most relevant domain are organizational control, people control, technological control, and physical control. For organizational control are related to governance, policies, responsibilities, access control, incident response, and risk ownership. These controls are important because cybersecurity does not only depend on technical tools. It's also depend on proper rules, accountability, and management approval. So for the people control are also important, especially for risks involving phishing, weak password practice, and remote working. Even with strong technologies, employees can still become the weakest point if they are not aware of cyber threats. That is why awareness training and secure work from home practice are needed. The most frequently used control is in technological control. This is because ATOS Cyber's major risks involve technical assets such as the firewall, VPN remote access, DMZ web servers, DMZ application servers, DMZ storage servers, endpoint device, Wi-Fi router, internet switch, printer, and IP phones. Physical control are also relevant, but they are less emphasized because the scope of this audit mainly focuses on cybersecurity and network infrastructure risks. Important examples of how risks are mapped to ISO IEC 27002 controls. For RS01, the risk is firewall misconfiguration. If firewall rules are not properly configured, attacker may bypass the security perimeter and access internet network services or DMZ resources. To reduce this risk, ATOS Cyber maps it to controls such as network security, configuration management, logging, monitoring, and segregations of network. This control helps ensure that firewall rules are secure, unnecessary inbound traffic is blocked, and suspicious activity are detected. Next, for RS02, the risk is a DDoS attack against the DMZ web server. Since this risk affects availability, it is mapped to capacity management, redundancy, monitoring, network security, and incident response control. This control helps reduce downtime and improve readiness during service disruption. And lastly, for RS03, the DMZ application server may be attacked through unpatched applications or insecure coding. Therefore, the map controls include vulnerability management, secure coding, security testing, application security requirements, and web application firewall implementation. Control implementation priority is decided based on how serious the risk is, how critical the affected asset is, and how much impact the risk can cause to the business. The first important area is VPN remote access. This is a high priority because it is cyber support work from home arrangements. If attackers steal VPN credentials, they may access internet system remotely. Therefore, controls such as multi-factor authentication, strong password policies, session timeout, logging alerting, and VPN log review must be implemented urgently. The second priority is firewall security. The firewall is very important because it protects the boundary between the internet and the internal network and also the DMZ. If firewall rules are misconfigured, many systems may be exposed at the same time. So for the third priority is DMZ server security. The DMZ web server, application server, and storage server are more important because they support public-facing and business-critical services. These servers need protection such as DDoS protection, WAF patch management, vulnerability scanning, backup protection, and anti-ransomware control. And lastly, for the endpoint security is also a priority because phishing attacks usually target employees. If one endpoint is compromised, attacker may steal credentials or maul deeper into the internet network. Therefore, endpoint protections and awareness training are very important. So for Chapter 8, focus on the risk acceptance. Risk acceptance is the final phase of the cyber risk management process. After risks have been identified, analyzed, evaluated, treated, and mapped to ISO IEC 27002 controls, the remaining risks must be reviewed. These remaining risks are called residual risks. Residual risks exist because security control can reduce risk, but they cannot remove every threat completely. For example, even after implementing MFA for VPN access, there's still a possibility of phishing, stolen device, or suspicious logging attempt. Because of that, the risk does not disappear completely, but it becomes more manageable. Cyber use clear acceptance criteria. Very low residual risk can be accepted because they have limited business impact. Medium risk can be accepted conditional if proper control have already been implemented and continuous monitoring is in place. However, high and critical residual risks are not acceptable because they can seriously affect customer data, service availability, system integrity, and company reputations. Therefore, acceptance risks must be documented, approved by management, assigned to responsible parties, and monitored regularly. After the treatment action are applied, Cyber review the residual risk level for each risk. Several risks that were originally critical or high are reduced to medium or low. So for the RS01, the firewall risk was originally critical. After firewall rule hardening, inbound traffic restriction, logging, and continuous monitoring, the residual risk become medium. This means the risk is still present, but it can be accepted with monitoring. So for the RS03, the DMZ application server risk is reduced to medium after applying patch management, secure coding review, vulnerability scanning, and web application firewall implementation. This control reduces the possibility of application exploitation. Next, for RS04, ransomware risk on the storage server is reduced from high to low. This is because the organization applied strong access control, offline backup restoration testing, and anti-ransomware protection. For RS06, VPN remote access risk is reduced from critical to medium after applying MFA, password policies, session timeout, logging alerting, and VPN log review. And lastly, for RS08, internet network lateral movement risk is reduced from high to low after VLAN segmentation access control list, internal firewall rules, and monitoring are implemented. This shows that the treatment controls are effective because they reduce risk to a more manageable level. The acceptance of residual risk must be justified properly. Cyber does not accept risk without reason. The decision is based on the cost versus benefit, business need, and operational constraint. From the cost versus benefit perspective, some advanced control may be too expensive or may require additional manpower, new system, and major changes. For example, after MFA and VPN monitoring are implemented, the VPN risk is already reduced to medium. A more advanced zero trust system may improve security further, but it may not be immediately practical due to cost and complexity. From the business need perspective, Cyber cannot simply shut down important systems to remove risk completely. The firewall VPN, DMZ server, Wi-Fi, and endpoint device, printer, and IP phones are needed for daily operation, customer service, remote work, and internet communication. From the operational constraint perspective, security change must be planned carefully. Firewall rules change must be tested to avoid blocking legitimate traffic. Application patching must be scheduled to avoid downtime. Network segmentation must be planned properly to avoid disrupting business communication. Because of that, residual risks are accepted only if they remain within the organization risk acceptance criteria. Accepted risks must also be approved by responsible stakeholders and monitored regularly. So the table shows how the risk level change after treatment. Most critical and high risks are reduced to medium or low. For example, the firewall risk is reduced from critical to medium after rule hardening and monitoring. The storage server risk is reduced from high to low after backup and anti-ransomware protections. This means the remaining risk can accepted, but medium risk must still be monitored regularly. The conclusions is that Cyber has completed the structured cyber risk management process. The audit identifies major cybersecurity risks that may affect the firewall, VPN access, DMZ server, endpoint device, internet network, Wi-Fi router, printer, and IP phone system. The most serious risks involve unauthorized access due to firewall misconfigurations, VPN credential theft, phishing attack, DDoS attack on the DMZ web server, web application exploitations, ransomware on the storage server, and lateral movement inside the internet network. These risks are important because they are affect confidentiality, integrity, availability, customer trust, business continuity, and company reputation. Through risk treatment, suitable control are proposed to reduce the risk. These include MFA, firewall hardening, DDoS protections, WAF, patch management, backup protections, and also endpoint protection. Phishing awareness and network segmentation, logging, and monitoring also is the purpose of the reduce of the risk. The ISO IEC 27002 control mapping make the treatment plan stronger because each recommendation is linked to recognized security control. After treatment, the remaining residual risks are reviewed and accepted only when they are very low or medium level with proper justifications and monitoring. Overall, this audit helped Cyber improve cybersecurity governance, strengthen its control environment, and manage cyber risk in a more organized and auditable way. So that's it. Thank you.